We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
As we enter the final segment of this episode of Liberty Nation Radio, Election Edition, we continue to be joined by Liberty Nation's senior political editor and long-time host of this here radio show, Mr. Tim Donner. Tim, we've talked about the present, we've talked about the past. Now I want to talk about the future. Now, we're not going to make predictions because nobody wants that particular egg on their face come November 6th. But what do you think the country will look like in terms of the division that's been so prevalent after the election?
Well, I think the numbers kind of tell the story. If Kamala Harris wins the election, we will have been ruled by progressive presidents for 16 of the last 20 years, with only the one Trump term breaking up that succession of progressive presidents. On the other hand, if Trump wins, and, him being an advocate of radical change, forceful radical change, break the furniture kind of change, break up the bureaucracy kind of change, then 8 of the last 12 under Trump, by the time we get to 2028, the country's going to look very different than it does now. But either way, people are saying it's the most important election of our lifetime. We hear that every 4 years. I wouldn't necessarily say it's the most important of our lifetime because I can't make such a profound judgment like that. But it would leave let's put it this way, to be locked into 4 more years of a progressive era would change the country, I think, in a way that we have never seen before. And likewise with Trump, but they're so opposite from one another. I think the outcomes, let's compare it, for example, to George W. Bush and Al Gore in 2000. Okay, Bush won an unspeakably small victory by 537 votes in one state, Florida. But if he hadn't won, I don't think you would have seen an Al Gore that would try to pack the Supreme Court, who would try to add states to the Union to guarantee permanent progressive or liberal majorities for as far as the eye can see. You wouldn't see him regulate the economy to a degree we've never seen before. And even you look at Barack Obama, a lot of people on the left were disappointed that he didn't govern in a more progressive way. He understood political reality. He deported more people, I think, even than Donald Trump, who had crossed the border illegally. But this time, we can see from Biden, and we can see, especially from Harris, Biden adjusted to progressivism because that was the current prevailing wind in the Democratic Party, whereas Kamala Harris, I think everybody believes, is a true believer in progressivism. And Donald Trump is a true believer in the MAGA agenda. And I can't imagine any two outcomes being any more opposite than there would be between a Kamala victory and a Trump victory. Now, at the same time, a lot of this depends, frankly, Mark, on what happens in Congress. And at this point, it looks like the Republicans could hardly lose the Senate because they're down 2 seats, but they're going to win West Virginia, and it appears very likely they're going to win Montana, which would give them 51. And they've got about 4 other senatorial races that are on a knife's edge. So it appears they'll get the Senate. I think the Democrats are far more optimistic about getting the House, but down ballot ticket splitting, so to speak, has become increasingly rare in the most divided society we've had in who knows how long. Some people say since the Civil War, but at least since the 1960s. So people voting for Trump and the Democrat, or for Harris and the Republican for Congress or for Senate, appears less likely than almost any time in the past, which means I think it's fairly likely that if Trump wins the presidency and and the Republicans win the Senate, they are more likely than not to hold the House, where they have the slimmest of possible majorities. I believe it's 4 seats at this point, which makes it a virtual toss-up, and there's only about 30 battleground races for the House. So if Trump governs with a divided Congress or an all-Democratic Congress, that will stall his agenda, and he'll be limited mostly to executive actions. Likewise, in reverse, with Kamala Harris presiding over a split Congress or a Republican-run House and Senate. If Trump gets a clean sweep, the trifecta, as I call it, the White House, the Senate, and Congress, or Kamala Harris does, then you're going to see big sweeping changes from Trump. From Kamala Harris, you'll see her more double down on regulations, higher taxes, government mandates, and taxpayer-funded giveaways to limited groups whose support she really needs in this election. And she will immediately, of course, pivot to a try for re-election, which means she'll try to consolidate the voters who put her in office and satisfy their needs. So look, 16 out of 20 for progressives in terms of years, or 8 out of 12 for Trump. That tells you a lot right there.
It does. I think something that's vastly overlooked is while obviously Kamala's been spending the vast majority of her time in the battleground states. Donald Trump has, and his surrogates have spent a lot of time there too, but he's also been out in California and New York. And people aren't really looking at what he's doing there is trying to secure a House majority. And now that seems to me quite a forward-looking position that he's taking. By the same forward-looking token, I hear reports that he's actually already started building his transition team, because normally that's paid for through the government after the election. But what he's doing is using money, his own money and money from private donors. He's actually putting together a transitional team now. And that seems to me somebody who's supremely confident about winning.
Well, that's true. But it's also, you have to look at the fact that Donald Trump was the first president ever not to come out of the political class or the military. We've had 4 presidents who come out of the military, starting with George Washington and all the way through Dwight Eisenhower. Everyone else has come from the political class. When Donald Trump won in 2016, he had absolutely no foundation in Washington upon which to build his presidency. So he relied on the opinions of people who often had contempt for him or were very wary of him. This time he is, as the saying goes, he knows where the bodies are buried. So he's going to get a running start and probably have a much bigger rollout for his presidency than he did in 2017.
We'll see what happens after Election Day. Good luck, everybody. And that's all we have time for on this week's edition of Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio America Network. I've been your host, Mark Angelides. I'd like to take a moment to thank our special guest today, Mr. Tim Donner, and of course, thank you, the audience at home, for taking the time to tune in and join us each and every week. Remember, Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. Thanks for being here.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.